Good evening. This breaking story has shocked the business world tonight after billionaire investor Nathan Carter became the center of a public scandal during his company's annual executive gala in downtown Manhattan. The female reporter's voice echoed from televisions inside restaurants, airport lounges, luxury apartments, and late-night bars across the country. Guests say the evening was supposed to celebrate Carter Global's record-breaking year. But the celebration took a dramatic turn when Nathan Carter's wife publicly accused him of having an affair with his personal secretary, moments before dozens of investors, executives, and media cameras. The screen shifted to shaky cell phone footage. A massive ballroom glittered beneath crystal chandeliers. Wealthy guests stood frozen beside champagne glasses and half-finished conversations. At the center of the footage stood Amelia Carter, elegant black dress, calm face, steady hands, and eyes that looked far too wounded to cry anymore. Across from her stood her husband, Nathan Carter, one of the most powerful tech billionaires in America. His expression had none of the confidence people usually associated with him. Only shock, only fear, only the terrifying realization that his carefully controlled world was collapsing in real time. "We are still gathering details," the reporter continued, but sources close to the couple claim the marriage had been struggling privately for years despite their public image as one of New York's most admired power couples. The footage zoomed slightly as Amelia lifted a microphone. The ballroom was silent. No music, no movement, not even the sound of silverware. Then Amelia spoke, and, with one sentence, she destroyed the illusion everyone believed. "I spent years protecting a man," she said softly, "who stopped protecting our marriage a long time ago." Several people in the crowd lowered their eyes instantly. Others looked directly at Nathan. A woman near the stage covered her mouth. Nathan looked like he wanted to speak, but no words came out, because somewhere deep down, he knew she was telling the truth. The screen cut back to the reporter. Sources claim Amelia Carter presented private messages during the confrontation, exposing an alleged affair between Nathan Carter and his executive assistant, Vanessa Brooks. Another image appeared on the screen. Nathan and Vanessa, leaving a hotel together weeks earlier. Then another. Nathan touching Vanessa's back at a corporate event, while Amelia stood only feet away speaking to investors. Then another. A blurry late-night photo of Nathan entering Vanessa's apartment building. "Social media reactions have exploded tonight," the reporter continued. "Many people are praising Amelia Carter for publicly standing up for herself after years of silence. But the real story, the part cameras could never fully capture, started long before that ballroom. Long before the affair. Long before the humiliation. It started quietly, the way most broken marriages do. Not with screaming, not with hatred, but with silence. And silence can destroy a relationship long before betrayal ever enters the room. 3 months earlier, the Carter mansion overlooked the Hudson River like something pulled from the cover of an architecture magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected Manhattan's glittering skyline, while soft jazz music played through hidden speakers in the walls. Everything looked perfect, expensive, elegant, untouchable. But Amelia Carter sat alone at the 20-seat dining table, staring at a candle slowly burning itself out beside untouched food. Again, the clock on the wall read 9:47 p.m. Nathan was late. Again, she checked her phone one more time. No message, no call, nothing. A small part of her wanted to be angry, but exhaustion had replaced anger months ago, maybe even years. She looked down at the dinner she spent 2 hours preparing herself, despite the house staff offering to help. Nathan used to love homemade meals, especially when they first got married. Back then, they used to eat sitting on the kitchen counter of their tiny apartment while laughing over burnt pasta and cheap wine. Back then, success had still felt exciting instead of exhausting. Back then, he used to look at her like she was the center of his world. Now it sometimes felt like she was simply part of the furniture inside it. The sound of the front door opening finally echoed through the mansion. Amelia straightened slightly in her chair. A strange mix of relief and disappointment hit her at the same time. Nathan entered wearing a dark overcoat over his expensive suit, one hand holding his phone against his ear. "Move the Singapore meeting to Thursday," he said while walking through the hallway. "No, I don't care what legal says right now. Fix it." He barely looked up as he loosened his tie. Amelia watched him quietly. He looked tired, not normal tired, drained, like a man carrying invisible weight he no longer knew how to put down. But instead of talking about it, he buried himself deeper inside work every single day. Nathan finally ended the call and rubbed his forehead. "That dinner?" he asked absent-mindedly. Amelia gave a small nod. "I waited." Nathan glanced toward the table, as if only just noticing the candles. Guilt flickered briefly across his face. "Amelia." "It's okay," she interrupted gently. And that, right there, was becoming the problem. Everything was always okay, even when it wasn't. Nathan removed his watch slowly, before sitting across from her. The massive table somehow made them feel even farther apart. "I lost track of time," he said. "You always lose track of time lately." The words came out softer than she intended. Nathan leaned back slightly, not defensive, just tired. "You know how things are right now." Amelia looked at him carefully. That sentence, again. "You know how things are." Translation: "Don't ask for too much from me right now." She nodded slowly, even though disappointment tightened quietly inside her chest, because she did understand pressure. What Nathan never seemed to understand was that loneliness could exist even inside marriage, especially inside marriage. Nathan finally noticed the untouched wineglass beside her. "You didn't eat? I wanted to wait for you." Something painful moved behind his eyes for half a second. Then his phone buzzed again. The moment disappeared instantly. Nathan picked up the phone automatically. Amelia looked away toward the window overlooking the river. That hurt more than yelling ever could, because yelling at least required emotional presence. This felt like slowly disappearing beside someone who no longer noticed you fading. Nathan read the message quickly. A small crease formed between his brows. "Everything okay?" Amelia asked quietly. He hesitated, too briefly for most people to notice, but Amelia noticed everything about him. "Yeah," he said. "Just work." Another lie that sounded harmless. Another small moment. Another tiny crack forming inside a marriage already weakening beneath years of silence. And neither of them understood yet how dangerous small cracks become when ignored for too long. Nathan finally looked up at her fully for the first time that night. "You should have eaten without me." Amelia forced a faint smile. "And you should have come home earlier." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The distance between them sat quietly at the table like an invisible third person. And somewhere far beneath Nathan's exhaustion, beneath Amelia's loneliness, beneath all the unspoken feelings neither of them knew how to explain anymore, their marriage was beginning to break. Not loudly, quietly. The worst kind of breaking there is. If you've ever loved someone who slowly became emotionally distant while pretending everything was fine, then you already understand how painful silence can become inside a relationship. And sometimes, the most dangerous affairs begin long before anyone touches another person. But what Amelia still didn't know was that another woman had already started occupying the emotional space her husband stopped giving to her. The next morning, sunlight poured through the enormous bedroom windows, casting soft gold across white marble floors and carefully arranged furniture that looked untouched by real life. Amelia woke up alone. Nathan's side of the bed was already cold. For a few seconds, she simply stared at the ceiling in silence. There had been a time when mornings felt warm beside him. Back when Nathan used to pull her closer before getting out of bed. Back when he kissed her forehead absent-mindedly while checking emails. Back when small affection still existed naturally between them. Now, the bed often felt like a hotel room shared by polite strangers. She sat up slowly and reached for her phone. No message from Nathan. Not even, "Sorry about last night." Her chest tightened slightly, though she immediately pushed the feeling down. Lately, she had become an expert at swallowing disappointment before it fully formed. Amelia walked toward the bathroom while the city skyline reflected through the mirrors. Everything around her screamed luxury. But luxury had a dangerous way of hiding emotional emptiness. People saw the mansion, the cars, the designer dresses, the vacations. They never saw the silence during dinner, the unread messages, the emotional loneliness. And loneliness inside marriage was confusing because, technically, you weren't alone. Yet somehow you felt invisible anyway. Downstairs, the house staff moved quietly through the massive kitchen preparing breakfast. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter," the chef greeted politely. Amelia smiled softly. "Morning. You and Mr. Carter eating here this morning?" The question hit harder than it should have. "Just me." Again, the chef gave a sympathetic nod without meaning to. Amelia noticed it immediately. That was the humiliating part about emotional distance. Other people eventually noticed it too. She sat at the kitchen island staring at coffee she barely touched. A memory suddenly surfaced without warning. 7 years earlier, a tiny apartment kitchen in Brooklyn. Nathan standing barefoot in sweatpants, making terrible pancakes, while flour covered half the counter. "You're burning them?" Amelia laughed. "I'm innovating." "You're committing crimes against breakfast." Nathan grinned, before pulling her toward him with flour-covered hands. "You'll still marry me, though." She remembered the way he looked at her then, completely certain, completely present, like nothing in the world mattered more than building a future together. Back then, Nathan talked about success differently. He wanted freedom, security, a family, a life where neither of them struggled financially the way their parents had. He used to say, "I never want work to become my whole life." Funny how people slowly become the exact thing they once feared. Amelia blinked away the memory as her phone vibrated on the counter. Nathan. For a moment, relief warmed her chest. Then she opened the message. "Running between meetings all day. Dinner with investors tonight. Don't wait up." That was it. No heart, no affection, no apology. Just information, like a business update. Amelia stared at the screen longer than necessary before locking the phone quietly. Across the city, Nathan stepped out of a black SUV while assistants and employees moved around him quickly outside Carter Global headquarters. Phones rang constantly. Security greeted him immediately. Executives waited near elevators. Nathan looked composed on the outside, but internally, exhaustion sat heavily inside him like permanent pressure against his chest. "Morning, sir," an employee greeted nervously. Nathan nodded absent-mindedly. Another assistant rushed beside him, holding a tablet. The Singapore investors moved the call to 11. Legal needs approval on the acquisition documents. And, later, Nathan interrupted. The elevator doors opened. For 2 seconds, silence surrounded him inside the private elevator. He leaned back against the wall and closed his eyes briefly. He knew Amelia was unhappy. Of course he knew. He noticed every disappointed smile, every forced, "It's okay," every quiet dinner. But lately, every part of his life felt demanding. Investors wanted more. The board wanted expansion. Employees depended on him. Media watched everything. And somehow home had stopped feeling peaceful too. Not because Amelia was cruel. She wasn't. That almost made it worse. Nathan simply felt like he was constantly failing someone no matter where he went. Then came the guilt. The guilt of knowing Amelia deserved more emotionally than he was giving her. And instead of confronting that guilt honestly, he escaped from it. Work became easier than emotional conversations. Deadlines became easier than vulnerability. Emails became easier than explaining why he constantly felt overwhelmed inside his own life. The elevator doors opened. "Mr. Carter," a familiar female voice greeted warmly. Nathan looked up. Vanessa Brooks stood outside his office, holding a folder against her chest. Late 20s, sharp eyes, professional posture. But unlike most employees around him, Vanessa never looked intimidated by Nathan. She looked attentive, calm, present. "Good morning," she said with a small smile. "You skipped breakfast again, didn't you?" Nathan gave a tired exhale that almost resembled a laugh. "That obvious? You look exhausted." Simple words. But something about being noticed felt strangely comforting. Vanessa handed him coffee as they walked toward his office. "I adjusted your afternoon schedule," she explained. "You were double booked again." Nathan loosened his tie slightly. "Thanks. You should probably sleep at some point this year too." That earned a real laugh from him. Small, brief, but real. Vanessa noticed immediately, and so did Nathan. Inside the office, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan, while assistants moved outside the glass walls. Nathan sat behind his desk while Vanessa organized files beside him. "You okay?" she asked after a moment. Nathan looked up. Most people asked him that casually. Vanessa asked, like she genuinely expected an honest answer. He hesitated, then shrugged lightly. "Just tired." She studied him carefully, but didn't push further. That was another reason he found himself relaxing around her lately. No emotional pressure, no disappointment, no difficult conversations waiting beneath every silence. Just ease. And emotional affairs often begin exactly there. Not with attraction, not with intention, but with relief. Back at the mansion, Amelia sat inside her home office, staring at unfinished architecture sketches she had abandoned years earlier after Nathan's business exploded. She used to love designing spaces. Back then, she dreamed about opening her own architecture firm someday. But life changed quickly after Nathan became successful. Travel, events, public appearances, supporting his career. Somewhere along the way, her own dreams quietly moved aside. And the frightening part, she wasn't even sure when it happened. Her eyes drifted toward an old framed photo sitting near the desk. Nathan holding her during their first year of marriage. Neither of them looked polished back then. No luxury, no bodyguards, no headlines, just love, real love. The kind built through shared struggle and late-night conversations about the future. Amelia touched the frame lightly. "When did we become like this?" she whispered, but no answer came. Because relationships rarely collapse in one dramatic moment. Usually, they erode slowly. Conversation by conversation, disappointment by disappointment, silence by silence. And by the time people finally realize how far apart they've grown, another person has often already entered the emotional space left empty between them. That evening, Nathan sat across from investors inside an expensive restaurant while Vanessa reviewed notes beside him. Nathan barely touched his food. "You should eat something," Vanessa murmured quietly. Nathan rubbed his forehead. "Long day. You've been saying that every day." He glanced at her. There was concern in her voice. Not obligation, concern, and after months of feeling emotionally disconnected almost everywhere else in his life, that concern began mattering more than it should have. Far more. Meanwhile, miles away, Amelia sat alone beside the giant bedroom window watching rain slide down the glass. Nathan's side of the bed remained untouched again. But tonight, something felt different. Not anger, not sadness, something quieter, something colder. The terrifying beginning of emotional detachment. And, once emotional detachment enters a marriage, sometimes betrayal is only a matter of time. If this story is already touching your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Love Stories by Mr. Johnson for more emotional American love stories filled with real-life lessons, heartbreak, healing, and unforgettable endings. And tell me in the comments, at what point do you think a relationship truly begins to break? Is it the cheating? Or the silence that comes long before it? Because sometimes people don't fall out of love overnight. Sometimes they slowly stop reaching for each other. Until someone else does. Rain tapped softly against the windows of Carter Global headquarters, while Nathan stood inside his office staring at the Manhattan skyline without really seeing it. His phone buzzed twice on the desk. One message from an investor, one from Amelia. He opened the investor message first automatically. That realization bothered him more than he wanted to admit. By the time he finally opened Amelia's text, several minutes had already passed. Dinner tomorrow? Just us? I miss you. Nathan stared at the message longer than necessary. A strange heaviness settled inside his chest. Not because he didn't love her. That was the complicated part. He still did. In many ways, Amelia was the most important person in his life. But lately, every interaction between them carried invisible emotional weight. Every quiet look from her felt like disappointment. Every conversation felt like a reminder of what he wasn't giving enough of. Every moment at home felt like standing inside a room where something fragile had already cracked. And Nathan was tired. Tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. He rubbed his jaw slowly before typing. Tomorrow might be difficult. Big week. I'll let you know. He stared at the message before sending it. Even he could tell how emotionally empty it sounded. Still, he pressed send. Across the city, Amelia sat inside a quiet cafe reviewing architecture sketches when Nathan's reply appeared. Her expression didn't visibly change. That was becoming her survival skill lately. Not reacting. Not expecting too much. Not allowing disappointment to fully show anymore. But internally. His message hurt more than she wanted to admit. Not because dinner mattered that much. Because effort did. A woman working behind the counter called out another customer's order, while soft music played overhead. Around Amelia, people laughed, talked, connected. Meanwhile, her marriage increasingly felt like two people managing life beside each other, instead of truly living it together. She locked her phone, and looked back at the sketch in front of her. A community center project. Simple design, warm lighting. Open spaces meant to make people feel emotionally safe. Her old professor used to tell her, architecture isn't just about buildings. It's about how people feel inside spaces. Funny enough, the same thing applied to relationships. People didn't stay emotionally where they felt unseen. At Carter Global, Vanessa entered Nathan's office carrying updated reports. You've been staring out that window for 10 straight minutes, she said lightly. Nathan sat down slowly. Just thinking. That usually means something's wrong. He exhaled quietly. Does it? With you? Yes. Vanessa placed the files on his desk before studying him carefully. There was something dangerously comforting about the way she paid attention to him. Not because she solved his problems, because she noticed them. And when someone feels emotionally ignored long enough, being noticed starts feeling intimate. Nathan leaned back in his chair. Amelia wanted dinner tomorrow, he admitted. Vanessa's expression shifted almost invisibly. Oh, I probably can't make it. You probably can, she said carefully. You just don't want another difficult conversation. Nathan looked at her. That surprised him. Vanessa rarely challenged him directly. You think that's what this is? I think you're avoiding home lately. Silence settled briefly between them. Nathan hated how accurate that sounded. Not because he disliked Amelia, because being around her lately forced him to confront emotions he kept pushing away. Guilt, distance, failure. Vanessa sat across from him gently. You know, she said softly. Sometimes people stop talking honestly because they're scared the conversation will confirm something they don't want to face. Nathan looked down briefly. The frightening thing? He understood exactly what she meant. Back at the cafe, Amelia packed her sketches slowly before noticing a couple sitting nearby, probably mid-20s. The man reached across the table, absent-mindedly brushing hair from the woman's face, while she laughed quietly at something he whispered. Such a small gesture. But Amelia suddenly realized she couldn't remember the last time Nathan touched her naturally like that. Not out of obligation, not during public appearances, not distractedly, just affection. The realization sat painfully in her chest. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her friend Sophia. Still coming Saturday? Amelia stared at the message. She almost cancelled automatically out of habit. Lately she had isolated herself emotionally without fully noticing it. Everything in her life revolved around Nathan's schedule, Nathan's career, Nathan's world. Somewhere along the way, She stopped building her own. Yeah, she finally replied. I'll be there. For the first time in weeks, that small decision felt strangely important. That evening, Nathan and Vanessa remained at the office long after most employees left. The city outside glowed beneath rainfall while paperwork covered the conference table between them. You ever miss your old life? Vanessa asked suddenly. Nathan glanced up. What old life? The version before all this. He leaned back thoughtfully. Sometimes. What do you miss? Nathan surprised himself by answering honestly. Simplicity. Vanessa nodded slowly. You seemed happier in those old photos online. Nathan gave a faint laugh. Careful, that sounds dangerously observant. You always look different around Amelia in those pictures. Something tightened quietly inside Nathan's chest. Because she was right. Back then, he smiled easier. Touched Amelia constantly. Looked at her like success meant nothing without her beside him. Now most of their conversations revolved around schedules, events, obligations and emotional landmines neither knew how to address. Vanessa lowered her eyes briefly before speaking again. She still loves you. Nathan looked away toward the rain-covered windows. I know. Do you? The question lingered heavily. Nathan rubbed his forehead slowly. What's that supposed to mean? Vanessa hesitated. Then, people who feel loved usually don't look lonely all the time. The words hit harder than Nathan expected, because deep down, he had noticed Amelia's loneliness too. He noticed the quiet sadness in her eyes, the way she stopped asking him certain questions, the way her smiles had become smaller. But instead of confronting the growing emotional distance between them, he kept running from it. And emotional avoidance is dangerous, because ignored emotions do not disappear. They simply grow in silence until someone eventually breaks beneath them. Later that night, Nathan arrived home after midnight. The mansion was dark except for a single lamp glowing inside the living room. Amelia sat curled beneath a blanket, reading quietly. She looked up when he entered. For a second, neither spoke. Nathan suddenly remembered how beautiful she looked in peaceful moments like this. No cameras, no makeup team, no public image, just Amelia. Real, warm, quietly hurting. You're awake, he said softly. I was reading. Nathan loosened his tie slowly. Something about the silence between them felt heavier tonight. Amelia placed her book down gently. How was work? Busy. Always busy. Always the same answer. Nathan could tell she wanted to say more, but instead, she simply nodded. And somehow, that hurt worse than criticism. Because when people stop expressing disappointment, sometimes it means they're starting to emotionally give up. Nathan moved closer slowly. You okay? Amelia almost laughed at the irony. Weeks of emotional distance, months of disconnection, and suddenly, you okay? But she looked at him carefully before answering. No, she admitted quietly. Nathan froze slightly. That honesty caught him off guard. Amelia stood slowly from the couch. I miss my husband, she said softly. And I honestly don't know if you miss me too. Nathan opened his mouth, then stopped, because he didn't know how to answer without confronting truths he had spent months avoiding. And in that painful silence, Amelia got her answer anyway. Nathan barely slept that night. Amelia's words stayed inside his head, long after the mansion became quiet again. I miss my husband. Simple sentence. But it carried years of emotional exhaustion beneath it. Nathan lay awake staring at the ceiling while Amelia slept facing the opposite side of the bed, her back turned gently toward him. Not angrily, not dramatically, just distant. And somehow that distance frightened him more than yelling would have, because anger still meant emotional investment. Distance meant something else entirely. Around 3:17 a.m., Nathan quietly slipped out of bed and walked downstairs toward his office. The house felt enormous at night, cold, too polished to feel lived in. He poured himself whiskey he didn't even want before standing near the window overlooking the river. His reflection stared back at him through the glass, successful, respected, powerful, and completely unable to fix his own marriage. The frightening part. Nathan genuinely couldn't pinpoint exactly when things started breaking between them. There had been no explosive fight, no single betrayal, no dramatic turning point, just gradual emotional erosion. More work, more stress, more postponed conversations, more emotional absence. Until one day the woman who used to laugh with him about everything suddenly sounded lonely while sitting beside him. His phone buzzed softly against the desk. Vanessa, still awake? Nathan stared at the message, then typed back before thinking too hard. Yeah. Her reply came almost immediately. You sounded off earlier. Nathan exhaled slowly. That was the problem. Vanessa noticed him, not billionaire Nathan Carter, not CEO Nathan Carter, just him, or at least that's what it felt like. Just tired, he replied. 3 dots appeared instantly. That's not all it is. Nathan rubbed his jaw, then finally typed the truth he hadn't admitted openly to anyone. Amelia said she misses me tonight. Several seconds passed before Vanessa responded. Do you blame her? Nathan stared at the message. Something about seeing the situation written so plainly unsettled him deeply. No, he didn't blame Amelia. If anything, part of him blamed himself. But guilt had a strange effect on people. Sometimes, instead of motivating change, it pushed them further into avoidance. Because facing the damage honestly meant confronting the possibility that he had become the kind of husband he once promised never to be. Upstairs, Amelia opened her eyes quietly. Nathan's side of the bed was empty again. She wasn't surprised. Lately, emotional conversations with Nathan often ended one of two ways. Either silence or escape. She sat up slowly and wrapped her robe around herself before walking downstairs. Halfway down the staircase she noticed lights spilling from beneath Nathan's office door. Voices. Amelia paused. Nathan's voice low and tired. Then another voice through the speakerphone. Female. Vanessa. Amelia stood completely still. I don't know what she wants from me anymore, Nathan admitted quietly. The words hit her like cold water. Vanessa's voice answered gently through the phone. She probably wants to feel chosen again. Silence followed. Then Nathan gave a tired laugh. You make everything sound simple. No, Vanessa said softly. I just think people ignore problems until someone gets hurt. Amelia's chest tightened painfully. Not because the conversation sounded romantic, because it sounded emotionally intimate. There was familiarity in Nathan's voice. Comfort. Ease. Things that had slowly disappeared from their marriage. Amelia stepped back quietly before either of them noticed her standing there. By the time she returned upstairs, something inside her felt different. Not shattered, not furious, just colder. Like another emotional thread connecting her to Nathan had quietly snapped. And the terrifying thing about emotional betrayal is that sometimes it hurts more than physical cheating. Because emotional betrayal means someone else is receiving the vulnerability, honesty, and attention that once belonged to the relationship. The next morning, Amelia moved through the kitchen calmly, while staff prepared breakfast. Nathan entered 20 minutes later, looking exhausted. For a moment, guilt crossed his face when he saw her. Morning, he said carefully. Morning. Amelia poured coffee without looking at him directly. Nathan watched her closely. Something about her energy felt different today. Quieter, more withdrawn, like she had emotionally stepped further away overnight. You sleep okay? He asked. A little. Nathan hesitated. He wanted to explain, wanted to say something meaningful. But emotional avoidance had become such a habit that real honesty now felt strangely difficult. Instead, he said, Big day today. Amelia almost smiled sadly. Of course, work again. Always work. But this time, she didn't argue internally, didn't hope for more. That numbness frightened her, because people usually notice heartbreak. What they fail to notice is emotional exhaustion, the stage where someone becomes too tired to keep asking for love properly. Nathan sat across from her. We should probably talk later. Amelia looked up finally. About us? Nathan paused briefly. Yeah. Part of her wanted to feel hopeful hearing that. Instead, she simply nodded. Okay. Nathan noticed the emotional flatness in her response immediately, and suddenly panic flickered somewhere deep inside him. Because, for the first time, he realized Amelia might actually be slipping away, emotionally, not threatening to leave, not creating drama, just quietly disconnecting piece by piece. And quiet disconnection is incredibly dangerous, because many people don't take it seriously until it's already too late. At Carter Global later that afternoon, Vanessa sat reviewing schedules while Nathan stared distractedly at his laptop. You look worse today, she observed. Nathan rubbed his eyes. Didn't sleep much. Vanessa studied him carefully. Because of Amelia? Nathan gave a faint nod. Vanessa leaned back slowly. You should go home early tonight. Nathan looked at her. I have 3 meetings. You also have a marriage falling apart. The bluntness surprised him. Vanessa rarely spoke emotionally about Amelia, but today her expression carried something complicated beneath it. Not jealousy. Something closer to discomfort. Because even she was beginning to recognize how emotionally dangerous their connection had become. Nathan stood and walked toward the windows. You ever feel like you wake up one day and realize your life became something you barely recognize? Vanessa answered softly. All the time. Nathan gave a humorless laugh. I used to think success would make life easier. And did it? He looked down toward the streets far below. No. Success had bought comfort, luxury, power, but none of those things automatically created emotional closeness. If anything, success had slowly amplified every weakness already hiding inside his marriage. More pressure, less time, more emotional distance, more avoidance, and somewhere along the way, Nathan started feeling emotionally understood more inside office conversations than inside his own home. That realization should have alarmed him. Instead, part of him found comfort in it. That was the danger. Not sudden passion, not reckless lust, gradual emotional dependency. That evening, Amelia attended Sophia's birthday dinner downtown. For the first time in months, she laughed genuinely during conversation. Nothing dramatic, just normal human connection. Sophia noticed immediately. "There's my friend." She smiled warmly. "I haven't seen her in forever." Amelia laughed softly. "Life's been busy." Sophia gave her a knowing look. "No, your marriage has been busy." Amelia looked down briefly. "Sometimes the people outside your relationship notice its sadness before you fully admit it yourself." Sophia reached across the table gently. "Are you happy, Amelia?" The question lingered painfully. Amelia opened her mouth automatically to say yes, but the word never came out, because deep down, she no longer knew the answer. The question stayed with Amelia long after dinner ended. "Are you happy?" She replayed it during the drive home, inside the elevator, while removing her earrings in front of the bathroom mirror, because for years, happiness had become something she measured through stability instead of emotion. Nathan was successful. Their life was secure. They rarely fought. There was no abuse, no chaos. From the outside, her marriage looked ideal. So why did she feel emotionally starving inside it? Amelia stood at the sink, washing off her makeup slowly while memories drifted through her mind. Nathan bringing her coffee during late college nights. Nathan kissing her forehead before interviews. Nathan holding her hand while promising, "No matter how successful I become, you will always come first." The painful thing about broken relationships wasn't always that love disappeared. Sometimes love remained, but emotional presence disappeared first. And, without emotional presence, love slowly starts feeling unreachable. Downstairs, the front door opened around midnight. Nathan walked in, loosening his tie, exhaustion written across his face. When he noticed Amelia sitting awake in the living room, he paused slightly. "You're home late," she said softly. "So are you." Neither said it harshly, but lately, even harmless conversations carried tension beneath them. Nathan placed his keys down. "How was Sophia's dinner?" "Good." That answer surprised him. Amelia actually looked lighter somehow. Still sad, still distant, but less consumed by waiting for him emotionally. And instead of comforting him, that unsettled him. Because people often don't realize how much emotional control they've grown used to until the other person slowly stops centering their entire emotional world around them. Nathan sat across from her quietly. "You seem better tonight." Amelia gave a faint shrug. "I had a good evening." Again, something about that response bothered him irrationally. Not because he wanted her unhappy, but because he suddenly realized how long she had been lonely enough to feel relieved simply by spending time around people who emotionally noticed her. Nathan rubbed his hands together slowly. "We never finished our conversation." Amelia looked at him carefully. "You mean the one where you didn't answer me?" Nathan exhaled softly. "Fair. You asked if I missed you. You didn't have to answer if you didn't want to. That's not what happened." "Then what happened?" Nathan opened his mouth, closed it again, and there it was. The problem destroying them both. He genuinely didn't know how to communicate emotionally anymore without feeling exposed. Nathan had spent years becoming excellent at controlling situations professionally. But emotions, vulnerability, fear, those things felt chaotic to him, unsafe. So instead of expressing honestly, he withdrew. Meanwhile, Amelia interpreted his withdrawal as lack of love. Two people, same relationship, completely different emotional experiences. Nathan finally spoke quietly. "I don't know how to explain what's been happening inside my head lately." Amelia's expression softened slightly despite herself, because underneath her hurt, she still loved him deeply. "Then try," she whispered. Nathan leaned forward, resting his elbows against his knees. "Every part of my life feels demanding lately," he admitted. "Work never stops. Investors never stop. Problems never stop. And somewhere along the way," he hesitated. Amelia waited silently. "Home stopped feeling peaceful too." The words landed painfully between them. Not because Nathan meant cruelty, because Amelia understood what he was trying to say. He associated home with emotional pressure now, disappointment, distance, conversations neither of them knew how to handle anymore. Amelia looked down briefly. "And you think that's only happening to you?" Nathan frowned slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you're not the only person struggling here." Her voice remained calm. That somehow made it more heartbreaking. Amelia stood slowly, walking toward the windows overlooking the city. "You know what loneliness feels like, Nathan." He looked at her quietly. "It feels like sitting beside someone every night while slowly realizing they stopped seeing you emotionally months ago." Nathan's chest tightened. "That's not fair." Amelia turned toward him. "Isn't it?" Nathan stood too now. "I'm trying." "No," Amelia said softly. "You're surviving. That's different." Silence filled the room. Because, deep down, Nathan knew she was right. Survival had become his emotional strategy for everything. Work harder. Avoid discomfort. Push through exhaustion. Delay emotional conversations. But marriages cannot survive permanently on emotional avoidance. Eventually, one person starts emotionally starving. At Carter Global the next morning, Vanessa noticed Nathan's mood immediately. "You look terrible," she said while handing him coffee. Nathan gave a tired laugh. "Good morning to you too. You fight with Amelia?" Nathan loosened his tie. "Not exactly." Vanessa followed him into the office carefully. "What happened?" Nathan sat heavily behind his desk. She said, "I stopped seeing her emotionally." Vanessa's expression shifted subtly. "And, did you?" Nathan looked away. "That's the problem." "I don't know." Vanessa stayed quiet for a moment before speaking carefully. "I think people sometimes confuse providing with loving." Nathan glanced up. "What?" "You built this incredible life for her," Vanessa explained gently. "But emotional presence matters too." Nathan stared at her. The strange thing? Hearing emotional truths from Vanessa felt easier than hearing them from Amelia, because Vanessa's observations carried no emotional history, no disappointment, no years of accumulated hurt, and that emotional ease was becoming increasingly dangerous. Vanessa sat across from him quietly. "Can I ask you something honestly?" Nathan nodded. "When was the last time you and Amelia were genuinely happy together?" The question hit him harder than expected, not because he lacked answers, because his answers were old memories, years old. Nathan leaned back slowly. "I don't know." And realizing that terrified him. Back at the mansion, Amelia sat inside her office reviewing old architecture portfolios when she discovered a sketchbook she hadn't touched in years. Inside were designs from before Nathan became wealthy: coffee shops, community spaces, family homes, dreams from a version of herself that slowly disappeared beneath the role of supportive billionaire wife. She turned another page and found a handwritten note from Nathan taped inside years ago. "You're going to design buildings that make people feel something someday. I believe in you more than you realize." Amelia stared at the note quietly. Tears burned unexpectedly behind her eyes, because Nathan used to believe in her dreams passionately. At some point, both of them became so consumed surviving Nathan's success that Amelia's identity slowly faded into the background. And resentment grows dangerously in places where self-sacrifice goes emotionally unnoticed. Later that afternoon, Nathan and Vanessa attended a strategy meeting together downtown. During the presentation, Nathan barely focused. His mind kept replaying Amelia's words. "You're surviving. That's different." After the meeting ended, Vanessa walked beside him toward the parking garage. "You're somewhere else today," she observed. Nathan gave a tired smile. "Apparently, my emotional issues are becoming visible now." Vanessa laughed softly. "Maybe because you finally stopped pretending you don't have any." That made him look at her. Really look at her. Vanessa held eye contact calmly, and suddenly, something shifted in the silence between them. Not dramatic, not explosive, just awareness. The dangerous realization that emotional closeness had quietly formed between them, while neither fully acknowledged it. Vanessa noticed it too. Her expression changed slightly before she looked away first. "Nathan." But before she could continue, his phone buzzed. "Amelia." Nathan stared at the screen. Vanessa noticed immediately. "You should answer." Nathan hesitated briefly, and that tiny hesitation said more than either of them wanted to admit. Nathan stared at Amelia's name glowing across his phone screen, while silence stretched awkwardly between him and Vanessa inside the parking garage. For one dangerous second, he considered ignoring the call. Not because he didn't care about Amelia, because lately, every conversation with her felt emotionally heavy, while every interaction with Vanessa felt emotionally easy. And people are often drawn toward ease when they're emotionally exhausted. Vanessa noticed the hesitation immediately. Her expression tightened, almost invisibly. "You should answer," she repeated quietly. Nathan finally picked up. "Hey." Amelia's voice came softly through the phone. "Are you busy?" Nathan glanced briefly toward Vanessa. "A little." "What's wrong?" The pause on the other end lasted barely 2 seconds, but Amelia noticed it. Women often notice emotional shifts long before men admit they exist. "I just wanted to ask if you'd be home tonight." Nathan rubbed the back of his neck. "Probably late." Another silence. Then, "Okay." No disappointment in her voice this time. No emotional effort. Just acceptance. And strangely enough, that hurt Nathan more. "Amelia." "It's fine," she interrupted gently. "Drive safe." The call ended. Nathan lowered the phone slowly. Vanessa looked away toward the concrete floor. "You didn't want to answer," she said quietly. Nathan frowned. "That's not true, isn't it?" Something defensive rose instantly inside him. "I'm just tired." Vanessa nodded slowly. "Exactly." The word lingered between them with uncomfortable meaning, because exhaustion had become Nathan's excuse for every emotional failure lately. Too tired to communicate. Too tired to reconnect. Too tired to fix things. Yet somehow, he still found emotional energy for Vanessa. That truth unsettled him deeply. At the mansion, Amelia sat alone in the kitchen after the call ended. The chef had already gone home. The house staff stayed mostly upstairs. Rain tapped softly against the windows again. Everything felt quiet. Too quiet. She stared down at her phone, replaying Nathan's tone mentally. Distracted, distant, somewhere else emotionally. For months, Amelia kept telling herself she was imagining things. That stress explained everything. That work pressure was temporary. That marriage naturally changed over time. But intuition is difficult to silence forever. Especially female intuition. Not because women are irrationally suspicious like some people claim, because emotional distance leaves clues. And Amelia had started noticing all of them. The late nights, the distracted texting, the emotional absence, the way Nathan smiled at his phone sometimes while barely looking at her during dinner. Most painful of all, he no longer reached for her naturally. Affection had become rare enough that she now noticed every missing gesture individually. She stood slowly and walked toward the living room before noticing Nathan's jacket draped over the couch from the night before. As she picked it up absent-mindedly, a soft, unfamiliar scent reached her. Perfume, not hers. Amelia froze. Her fingers tightened slightly around the fabric. The scent wasn't overwhelming, just faint enough to create uncertainty. And uncertainty is emotionally cruel because it forces people to question their own instincts before confronting reality. Amelia closed her eyes briefly. Maybe it meant nothing. Corporate events, meetings, crowded elevators, there were innocent explanations. But deep down, something inside her already knew. At Carter Global, Nathan sat inside his office trying unsuccessfully to focus on financial reports, while Vanessa organized schedules nearby. The atmosphere between them felt subtly different after the parking garage conversation. More aware, more careful. Vanessa finally broke the silence first. I think we should establish better boundaries. Nathan looked up immediately. What? Vanessa kept her eyes on the tablet in her hands. You're married. The bluntness surprised him. And lately, this doesn't feel completely professional anymore. Nathan stared at her quietly. Part of him wanted to deny it instantly. But denial would have been dishonest. Because emotional intimacy had already crossed lines neither of them openly acknowledged before now. Vanessa finally looked at him directly. You talk to me about things you don't talk to your wife about. Nathan leaned back slowly. It's not like that. Then what is it like? He had no immediate answer. And that silence answered enough. Vanessa exhaled softly. I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable. You're not. But she was making him confront truths he'd spent months avoiding. That emotional dependency was forming, that he looked forward to seeing her. That conversations with Vanessa increasingly felt like emotional relief from the tension waiting at home. And emotional affairs rarely announce themselves dramatically. They grow quietly through repeated emotional comfort. Conversation after conversation. Confession after confession. Small emotional substitutions replacing intimacy inside the actual relationship. Nathan rubbed his forehead. I don't even know how things got this complicated. Vanessa gave him a sad smile. Things become complicated when people ignore what they're feeling too long. Meanwhile, Amelia sat inside her home office, staring blankly at her laptop without reading anything on the screen. Her thoughts kept circling back to the perfume scent, and suddenly, dozens of tiny moments from recent months started replaying differently in her mind. Nathan hiding his phone screen occasionally, smiling at messages privately, leaving rooms to answer calls, emotionally withdrawing more every week. Her chest tightened painfully. Still, a large part of her didn't want to believe Nathan would betray her physically. Nathan wasn't reckless. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't the stereotypical arrogant billionaire chasing women publicly, which somehow made the possibility even harder to process, because betrayal often hurts more when it comes from someone you deeply trusted emotionally. Her phone buzzed suddenly. Sophia, you okay? You sounded off last night. Amelia stared at the message, then typed, Can I ask you something weird? Always. Amelia hesitated before writing, How do you know if someone's emotionally leaving you? Several seconds passed, then Sophia replied, Usually you feel it long before you can prove it. Amelia's eyes burned unexpectedly, because that was exactly it. She felt Nathan slipping away emotionally, and the worst part, he seemed unaware he was even doing it. That evening, Nathan arrived home earlier than usual. For a brief second, Amelia almost felt hopeful. Maybe he was trying. Maybe yesterday's conversation mattered. Nathan entered the living room, loosening his tie, while Amelia sat reading quietly. You're home early, she said carefully. Meeting got cancelled. He moved toward the kitchen before stopping awkwardly. The distance between them felt strangely visible now, like both of them sensed something changing, but neither knew how to fully address it. Nathan finally spoke. You want dinner? Amelia looked surprised. With you? A flicker of hurt crossed his face. Yeah. For a moment, she almost said no automatically. Not out of cruelty. Self-protection. Because disappointment repeated too many times teaches people to emotionally guard themselves. But eventually she nodded softly. Okay. An hour later, they sat across from each other, inside a quiet upscale restaurant overlooking the river. At first, conversation felt painfully formal. Work, weather, mutual acquaintances, like strangers searching for safe topics. Then Nathan looked at her carefully. You've changed lately. Amelia lowered her glass slowly. How? You feel distant. The irony almost made her laugh. Instead, she asked quietly, do you know what happens to people when they feel emotionally ignored long enough? Nathan frowned slightly. What? They stop reaching. The words settled heavily between them. Nathan looked down briefly. Guilt moved silently through him. Because, deep inside, he knew Amelia was telling the truth, and while she sat across from him fighting to save emotional connection inside their marriage, another woman was already becoming the person he emotionally reached for first. For the next 2 weeks, Amelia stopped asking questions, and somehow, that frightened Nathan more than their difficult conversations ever had. No complaints, no emotional confrontations, no disappointed sighs, just quiet politeness. At first, Nathan convinced himself this was better, less tension, less emotional pressure, less guilt waiting for him every time he walked through the front door. But slowly, he began realizing something unsettling. Amelia wasn't becoming more peaceful. She was emotionally withdrawing, and emotional withdrawal is dangerous because it often happens silently, long before anyone says the word leave. One Thursday evening, Nathan entered the mansion after another late meeting and found Amelia sitting cross-legged on the living room floor surrounded by architectural blueprints. For a moment, he simply stood there, watching her. She looked focused, alive, more emotionally present than he had seen her in months. What's all this? He asked. Amelia looked up calmly. Design proposals. Nathan loosened his tie slowly. For what? A small redevelopment project in Brooklyn. That surprised him immediately. You're working again? The question came out more startled than he intended. Amelia noticed. Yes, she answered softly. I miss creating things that belong to me. Something complicated moved through Nathan's chest. Pride, surprise, and, strangely, discomfort. Because somewhere deep down, Nathan had grown unconsciously used to Amelia revolving around his world. Now she was slowly rebuilding her own. Nathan stepped closer, examining one of the sketches. It was beautiful. Warm open spaces, natural lighting, human-centered design. You did this? Amelia almost smiled faintly. Yes, Nathan. I still know how to design buildings. The quiet sarcasm caught him off guard. But beneath it sat years of feeling emotionally overlooked. Nathan placed the blueprint down carefully. I didn't mean it like that. I know. But part of her wondered if he truly realized how much of herself she sacrificed while supporting his rise. Not because he forced her, because love often makes people slowly abandon pieces of themselves willingly. And resentment becomes dangerous when sacrifice goes emotionally unrecognized for too long. Nathan sat beside her on the floor unexpectedly. For the first time in weeks, they occupied the same space, without tension, swallowing everything instantly. You never told me you were thinking about going back to architecture. Amelia looked at the papers quietly. You never asked. The words weren't cruel, just honest. Nathan leaned back against the couch slowly. That honesty stung because it exposed something painful. He had stopped being curious about his wife's inner world. At some point, their marriage became logistical instead of emotional. Schedules instead of conversations. Responsibilities instead of connection. And marriages cannot survive permanently without emotional curiosity. Nathan looked at her carefully. You're really serious about this? Yes. What changed? Amelia paused thoughtfully, then answered with quiet truth. I realized I spent years waiting for someone else to make me feel emotionally fulfilled. Nathan lowered his eyes. And now? Now I think I need to rebuild parts of myself. I abandoned. The sentence landed heavily between them, because both of them understood she wasn't only talking about architecture. Across the city the next morning, Vanessa sat inside Nathan's office reviewing travel schedules while he remained distracted during a conference call. Mr. Carter? Nathan blinked. What? You agreed to 3 meetings at the same time. He rubbed his forehead. Sorry. Vanessa studied him carefully. After the call ended. You've been somewhere else mentally all week. Nathan leaned back heavily in his chair. Amelia started working again. Vanessa smiled slightly. That's good, isn't it? It should be. But Nathan looked toward the windows. She feels different lately. Vanessa remained quiet. Nathan struggled to explain it properly. It's like she stopped needing me emotionally. The moment the words left his mouth, Vanessa's expression shifted subtly. Because underneath Nathan's confusion sat something uncomfortable. He missed being emotionally central in Amelia's life. Even while emotionally drifting away himself, Vanessa closed the tablet slowly. Maybe she just got tired of waiting. Nathan frowned slightly. What's that supposed to mean? Vanessa hesitated before answering carefully. Nathan, women can handle disappointment for a long time when they love someone, but eventually exhaustion replaces hope. Those words stayed with him longer than he expected, because deep down, he had started noticing the exhaustion in Amelia too. Not dramatic sadness, something quieter, like someone slowly accepting emotional reality after fighting it too long. Later that afternoon, Amelia attended a client meeting in Brooklyn regarding the redevelopment project. The building was old but full of potential. As she walked through unfinished hallways discussing design possibilities, something unfamiliar slowly returned inside her. Purpose. Not as Nathan Carter's wife. Not as part of a billionaire power couple. Just Amelia. Creative, intelligent, capable. One older contractor smiled while reviewing her sketches. You've got real talent. The compliment hit unexpectedly hard, because she couldn't remember the last time someone acknowledged her identity outside her marriage. On the drive home, Amelia rolled down the window, slightly letting cool air brush against her face. For the first time in months, she felt awake, emotionally, and healing often begins the moment people reconnect with the parts of themselves they abandoned trying to save others. That evening, Nathan attended a corporate charity event with Vanessa coordinating details nearby. Cameras flashed constantly as executives moved through the ballroom, shaking hands and smiling for photographs. Publicly, Nathan Carter looked exactly the same as always, confident, controlled, successful, but internally, everything felt unstable lately, especially after noticing Amelia emotionally shifting away from him. During the event, Vanessa handed him updated notes quietly. Their fingers brushed, accidentally. Both paused briefly. Tiny moment, barely noticeable, but awareness flickered instantly between them again. Vanessa pulled her hand back first. Nathan looked away toward the crowd. Neither acknowledged the tension directly, but emotional boundaries had already weakened long before physical attraction fully surfaced. And, once emotional lines blur, physical ones often become easier to cross. Hours later, Amelia sat alone inside the mansion reviewing project ideas. When Nathan finally returned home, he entered quietly, expecting darkness. Instead, he found her awake again, surrounded by sketches. Nathan loosened his tie slowly. You're always working now. Amelia looked up calmly. You used to admire ambition. The comment wasn't harsh. Still, Nathan felt it, because he suddenly recognized the irony. He respected ambition in everyone except the woman who sacrificed hers while helping build his empire. Nathan walked closer, examining another design. This one's incredible. Amelia blinked slightly. The compliment sounded genuine. For a brief second, old warmth almost surfaced between them. Then Nathan's phone buzzed. Vanessa. Amelia noticed immediately. Nathan hesitated before checking the message. That hesitation lasted less than 2 seconds. But sometimes, 2 seconds is enough to reveal everything emotionally. Amelia watched his expression carefully. You can answer it. Nathan looked up quickly. It's just work. Amelia held eye contact calmly. I didn't ask. Silence filled the room, instantly, because beneath the surface of that simple exchange, something dangerous had finally entered their marriage. Suspicion, and once suspicion enters a relationship, people start noticing truths they previously tried hard not to see. After that night, Amelia started paying attention differently, not obsessively, not dramatically, quietly. And quiet observation can be far more dangerous than emotional confrontation. Because once suspicion settles into someone's heart, small details begin connecting themselves naturally. Nathan taking his phone everywhere, turning the screen slightly away sometimes, smiling faintly at messages while emotionally absent during conversations with her. None of those things alone proved betrayal, but together, they painted a picture Amelia was becoming increasingly afraid to fully face. 3 nights later, Nathan stood in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting his cufflinks, while Amelia sat silently on the edge of the bed. You'll be late again? She asked softly. Nathan glanced at his watch. Probably. Another investor dinner? Yeah. The lie came easier now. That realization disturbed him more than he admitted even to himself. Amelia nodded quietly. No argument. No disappointment. Just silence. Nathan studied her reflection in the mirror carefully. You okay? There it was again. That question people ask after ignoring emotional damage for too long. Amelia looked down briefly before answering. I'm learning to be... Nathan frowned slightly. What does that mean? She stood slowly and walked toward the window. It means I spent too much time depending on someone else for emotional stability. Nathan's chest tightened. You're talking like we're already over. Amelia turned toward him carefully. Sometimes relationships end emotionally long before they end physically. The words unsettled him deeply, because lately he had started feeling the same fear. that Amelia was emotionally slipping beyond his reach, and part of him still desperately didn't want that. Even while emotionally crossing lines elsewhere, Nathan walked toward her slowly. Amelia. For a brief second, it looked like he wanted to say something real, something vulnerable, but his phone buzzed again. Vanessa. Nathan instinctively checked it, and the moment disappeared instantly. Amelia looked away toward the city lights. That hurt more than yelling ever could. Because emotional betrayal isn't only about cheating. Sometimes it's realizing someone else consistently receives the attention you've been starving for. At Carter Global the following afternoon, Vanessa closed Nathan's office door behind her carefully. You need to stop looking at me like that. Nathan glanced up from his laptop. Like what? Vanessa crossed her arms lightly. Like you're emotionally exhausted every time you walk in here. Nathan gave a humorless laugh. Maybe I am emotionally exhausted. Vanessa softened slightly. You know what I mean. Yes, he did. Lately, their conversations carried emotional intimacy neither of them openly acknowledged anymore. Nathan talked to Vanessa about stress, pressure, fear, marriage. Meanwhile, he barely communicated honestly with Amelia at all. Vanessa sat across from him quietly. I think you're lonely. Nathan leaned back slowly. That's dramatic. No, she said softly. It's honest. The frightening thing? Part of him felt understood hearing that. Nathan rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. You ever stay in something because you don't know how to fix it? Vanessa looked at him carefully. Are you talking about your marriage? Nathan didn't answer immediately. And once again, silence answered enough. Vanessa lowered her eyes briefly. We're getting too personal. Nathan knew she was right, but emotional dependency had already started forming roots between them. And emotional dependency becomes addictive when someone feels unseen elsewhere. Later that evening, Amelia attended another architecture meeting downtown. As she discussed designs with clients, she noticed something surprising. People listened to her. Not politely, not because of Nathan's name, because of her ideas, her talent, her voice. One client smiled warmly after reviewing her presentation. You explain spaces emotionally, he said. That's rare. Amelia thanked him softly, but internally, the compliment affected her deeply, because somewhere over the years, she had stopped seeing herself as an individual person with dreams separate from marriage. Now she was slowly remembering who she used to be before emotional loneliness consumed so much of her identity. After the meeting, Sophia joined her for coffee nearby. You look different, Sophia observed immediately. Amelia stirred her drink absent-mindedly. Different? How? More awake. That surprised her. Sophia leaned forward slightly. Have you noticed something about Nathan? The directness caught Amelia off guard. She looked down briefly. I don't know. Sophia gave her a knowing expression. That means yes. Amelia hesitated. Then quietly, I think there's someone else emotionally. Sophia's face softened instantly. Emotionally? I can feel it. That sentence alone nearly broke Amelia emotionally, because intuition often hurts before evidence ever appears. Sophia reached across the table gently. You don't deserve emotional neglect, Amelia. Amelia looked away toward the cafe window. Maybe I stopped showing up emotionally too. Don't do that. What? Don't take responsibility for someone else emotionally drifting away instead of communicating honestly. The words stayed with Amelia long after they left the cafe, because deep down, part of her had already started blaming herself for Nathan's distance. Many people do that in failing relationships. They shrink themselves emotionally trying to become easier to love, instead of asking why love stopped feeling emotionally safe in the first place. That same night, Nathan and Vanessa remained alone in the office after most employees left. Rain hammered softly against the windows, while city lights reflected across the glass walls. Vanessa reviewed files quietly before noticing Nathan staring blankly into space again. You should go home. Nathan exhaled slowly. I know, but he made no movement to leave. Vanessa closed the folder in front of her carefully. Nathan. He looked up. The tension between them felt impossible to ignore tonight. Not loud, not reckless, just emotionally dangerous. Vanessa stood slowly. This has to stop becoming our safe place. Nathan frowned slightly. What does that mean? It means, she hesitated. You come here emotionally every time things feel difficult with Amelia. Nathan lowered his eyes briefly. Because she was right. He had started associating Vanessa with emotional relief, and emotional relief is intoxicating when home feels emotionally heavy. Vanessa moved closer unconsciously. Nathan, you're married. The reminder should have created distance. Instead, something painful shifted across his face. I know, but his voice sounded tired, conflicted, lonely. Vanessa looked at him for a long moment. Then quietly, you need to decide what you actually want before people get hurt. People were already getting hurt. Neither of them admitted that aloud. Nathan finally stood. For one suspended moment, they remained too close to each other in the silence. Close enough to notice breathing, close enough to feel emotional tension thickening dangerously. Then Nathan's phone buzzed. Amelia. Again. Reality rushed back instantly. Nathan stepped backward, immediately reaching for the phone. Vanessa looked away first. Guilt moved sharply through her chest. Because somewhere along the line, this stopped feeling professional long ago. Meanwhile, across the city, Amelia sat alone in bed, scrolling absent-mindedly through social media, when a tagged corporate event photo appeared on her screen. Nathan standing beside executives at a business dinner earlier that evening. Vanessa stood beside him, smiling. Nothing inappropriate, nothing obvious. But Amelia suddenly froze. Nathan was looking at Vanessa the same way he used to look at her years ago. Attentive, present, emotionally engaged. Her stomach dropped painfully. And for the first time, Amelia stopped wondering if emotional betrayal was happening. Now she was starting to wonder how long it had already been going on. If this story is pulling at your emotions, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Love Stories by Mr. Johnson, and turn on notifications for more powerful American love stories filled with real-life lessons, heartbreak, healing, and emotional truth. And tell me honestly in the comments, do you think emotional cheating hurts just as much as physical cheating? Because sometimes, the most painful betrayal isn't finding out your partner touched someone else. It's realizing they gave someone else the attention, comfort, and emotional connection that used to belong to you. The gala invitation arrived 3 days later. Heavy black envelope. Gold lettering. Nathan Carter's annual executive celebration. One of the biggest corporate events of the year. Investors, media, celebrities, board members. An evening designed to celebrate success. Amelia stared at the invitation quietly while sitting inside her office. Normally she would have immediately started planning outfits, schedules, appearances. This time, she felt nothing, or at least that's what she tried telling herself. Because underneath the numbness sat something darker. Certainty. Not complete certainty yet, but enough intuition to make her heart feel permanently heavy. Later that evening, Nathan entered the mansion earlier than usual, carrying exhaustion across his face. When he noticed the invitation sitting on Amelia's desk, he paused. "You got it." Amelia looked up calmly. "I assume attendance is mandatory." Nathan loosened his tie slowly. "You don't have to come if you don't want to." The statement surprised her. Nathan used to insist on public appearances together constantly. Perfect image, perfect marriage, perfect power couple. Now he sounded uncertain, almost guilty. Amelia studied him carefully. "Would you rather I didn't?" Nathan looked away briefly. "No," but he answered too slowly. And once suspicion enters a relationship, hesitation becomes painfully loud. Amelia folded the invitation quietly. "I'll be there." Nathan nodded. For a moment, neither moved. Then, Amelia spoke softly. "Is Vanessa going?" Nathan's expression changed instantly. Very small. Most people would have missed it. Amelia didn't. "She's helping coordinate executive schedules," he answered carefully. Not technically a lie, still dishonest. Because Vanessa had become far more emotionally important to him than Nathan wanted to admit aloud. Amelia gave a faint nod. Of course. Nathan suddenly hated how emotionally calm she sounded lately. Not because he wanted fighting, because calmness felt like emotional surrender. And part of him was beginning to fear Amelia had already started detaching permanently. That night, Amelia waited until Nathan fell asleep before quietly opening his laptop inside the home office. Her hands trembled slightly, not from anger, fear. Fear that intuition was about to become reality. For several minutes, she simply stared at the screen without moving. Then finally, she checked. At first, there was nothing obvious. Emails, schedules, financial reports. Amelia almost convinced herself she was imagining everything. Then she noticed a hidden archived message thread. Vanessa. Her chest tightened instantly. For one suspended moment, Amelia considered closing the laptop and pretending none of this existed. Because sometimes ignorance feels emotionally safer than truth. But truth has a way of surfacing eventually, whether people are ready or not. Her fingers shook slightly as she opened the messages. The first texts looked harmless. Work updates, meeting adjustments, travel coordination. Then slowly, the tone changed. "You looked exhausted today. Did you eat anything yet? You should go home and rest. Then, I hate seeing you carry everything alone." Amelia's breathing slowed painfully. Emotional intimacy. Not just flirting, not random attraction. Something deeper. Months of emotional connection unfolding quietly while she sat at home wondering why her husband felt emotionally absent. Her eyes burned as she continued scrolling. Nathan talking about stress, marriage tension, loneliness. Things he stopped discussing honestly with her long ago. And then, the message that shattered something inside her completely. "Nathan, talking to you is the only time I feel understood lately." Amelia covered her mouth instantly. Tears blurred the screen. Not loud crying. The kind of silent heartbreak that feels almost physical inside your chest. Because betrayal hurts differently when it confirms the fear you've been emotionally fighting for months. Another message from Vanessa appeared further down. I wish things were different. Nathan's reply came minutes later. Me too. Amelia closed her eyes tightly. There it was. The moment emotional boundaries fully collapsed. Not physical evidence yet, but emotional betrayal was undeniable now. And emotional betrayal often cuts deeper because it means someone else slowly became the emotional home your partner stopped making with you. She kept reading despite the pain. Hotel reservations, late-night meetings, private dinners explained as work. Then finally, physical confirmation. A message from Nathan 2 weeks earlier. Last night felt dangerous. Vanessa, dangerous doesn't mean unwanted. Amelia stopped breathing for a second. Her entire body went cold. No more uncertainty. No more denial. Nathan had crossed the line completely. And suddenly, dozens of painful moments from recent months rearranged themselves into brutal clarity. The late nights, the emotional withdrawal, the guilt in his eyes, the distraction, the distance. While Amelia spent months blaming stress, her husband was emotionally and physically giving pieces of himself to another woman. A broken sound escaped her throat before she quickly covered her mouth again. Upstairs, Nathan slept peacefully. And somehow, that hurt most of all. Amelia stared at the screen for a long time afterward, not moving, barely breathing. Then, slowly, something unexpected happened. The tears stopped, not because the pain disappeared, because another emotion quietly replaced it. Clarity, cold, painful clarity. She suddenly realized something terrifying. She had spent so long trying to save the marriage alone that she forgot relationships cannot survive through one person's effort. Nathan didn't accidentally drift away. He chose emotional escape instead of honest communication. Again and again. And choices have consequences. Amelia wiped her face slowly before opening her phone. One by one, she photographed every message carefully, every confession, every emotional conversation, every lie. Then she created a hidden folder. The Truth. The title stared back at her from the screen. For several seconds, Amelia simply looked at those words quietly. Not revenge, not rage. Truth. Because after months of emotional confusion, truth finally felt solid. And terrifyingly enough, it also felt freeing. Upstairs, Nathan shifted slightly in his sleep, completely unaware that downstairs his marriage had just crossed a point of no return. The next morning, Nathan woke up to the smell of coffee. For a brief second, something about it felt familiar, comforting, like the early years of marriage before emotional distance settled permanently between them. He walked downstairs expecting silence and was surprised to find Amelia already sitting at the kitchen island, dressed elegantly for a client meeting. Blueprints rested beside her laptop. Coffee steamed gently near her hand. She looked composed, too composed. Morning, Nathan said carefully. Morning. Her voice sounded calm, soft, normal, and somehow that unsettled him instantly. Nathan poured himself coffee while studying her quietly. You're up early. I have meetings in Brooklyn. That architecture project? Amelia nodded. Nathan leaned lightly against the counter. How's it going? Good. Again, short answers. No emotional reaching. No effort to prolong conversation. Nathan suddenly realized how much Amelia used to try carrying their emotional connection almost entirely by herself. Now that she'd stopped, the emptiness between them felt impossible to ignore. He sat across from her slowly. You seem happier lately. Amelia looked up calmly. I'm learning how to focus on myself again. The statement should have sounded healthy. Instead, panic flickered quietly inside Nathan's chest, because somewhere deep down, he was beginning to realize Amelia no longer revolved emotionally around him the way she once did, and people often don't appreciate emotional loyalty fully until they feel it slowly disappearing. Nathan rubbed his hands together thoughtfully. I know things haven't been great between us lately. Amelia held his gaze for a moment. You think? The words weren't sharp, just painfully honest. Nathan exhaled quietly. I'm trying, Amelia. Her chest tightened slightly hearing that, because maybe part of him genuinely believed it. But trying after emotional betrayal already begins feels very different from trying before. Amelia looked down at her coffee. Are you? Nathan frowned slightly. What's that supposed to mean? She almost asked directly right then, almost confronted him immediately. The messages, Vanessa, the lies. But something stopped her, not fear. She simply realized Nathan still didn't understand the depth of what he had done emotionally, and part of her wanted him to feel secure a little longer. Wanted him standing confidently inside the illusion he built before reality shattered it completely. Amelia stood smoothly gathering her things. You should get ready for work. Nathan watched her carefully. Amelia, she paused. I know I've been distant. A strange sadness touched her expression briefly. You have no idea how distant you've actually become, she thought. But aloud she only said, "We're both tired, Nathan." Then she walked away before he could respond. Nathan remained seated in silence afterward. Something about her calmness felt wrong, not peaceful. Final. At Carter Global later that afternoon, Vanessa entered Nathan's office carrying schedules while he reviewed investor reports distractedly. "You okay?" she asked softly. Nathan leaned back heavily. "I can't read Amelia lately." Vanessa's expression shifted subtly. "What do you mean?" "She's different." Vanessa lowered the tablet slightly. "How?" Nathan struggled explaining it. She stopped reacting emotionally. Vanessa looked away briefly. "Because women often understand exactly what that means. Exhaustion. Emotional shutdown. The stage after repeated hurt, where survival replaces hope. She might just be protecting herself," Vanessa said quietly. Nathan frowned slightly. "From me?" Vanessa met his eyes carefully. "Yes." The word landed harder than he expected. Nathan rubbed his forehead slowly. "I never wanted to hurt her." Vanessa's chest tightened hearing that, because, despite everything happening between them, she believed him. Nathan wasn't a cruel man, just emotionally avoidant, lonely, weak in the wrong moments. But weakness still causes damage, and emotional affairs often begin with people convincing themselves no one is getting hurt yet. Vanessa sat across from him carefully. "Nathan." He looked up. "You need to decide what kind of man you want to be before this destroys everyone involved." Nathan stared at her quietly. The frightening thing? Part of him already knew things had gone too far emotionally. But another part still craved the emotional ease he felt around Vanessa. That was the danger of emotional escape. It feels comforting while quietly destroying the life waiting elsewhere. That evening, Amelia sat inside her office reviewing the screenshots again. Not obsessively, methodically. Every message deepened the same painful realization. Nathan gave another woman emotional intimacy while leaving his own wife emotionally starving. Her eyes paused on one specific message from Vanessa. "She doesn't understand you the way I do." Amelia stared at the sentence for a long time, then whispered softly, "No, I understood him too well." That was the heartbreaking truth. Amelia understood Nathan's pressure, his fears, his emotional avoidance. She simply kept excusing it too long, while neglecting her own emotional needs completely. And relationships become dangerous when empathy exists without boundaries. Her phone buzzed suddenly. "Nathan, running late tonight. Don't wait up." Amelia laughed softly to herself. Not amusement, recognition, even now. Even after everything. The lies continued naturally. She typed back, "Okay," then calmly placed the phone down. For the first time in months, Nathan's emotional distance no longer confused her. Truth had removed confusion completely. Now only pain remained. 2 nights later, the Carter Global Gala finally arrived. The Manhattan ballroom glittered beneath enormous chandeliers while luxury cars lined the entrance outside. Media cameras flashed constantly. Executives shook hands. Champagne flowed endlessly. Public perfection everywhere. Nathan adjusted his tuxedo backstage while assistants rushed around preparing schedules and speeches. "You nervous?" Vanessa asked quietly nearby. Nathan gave a faint smile. "Just tired." Vanessa studied him carefully. Tonight felt emotionally tense between them. Not romantic. Heavy. Because both of them understood something dangerous had formed over recent months. And neither knew where it was truly heading anymore. Nathan checked his watch. Did Amelia arrive yet? Vanessa glanced toward the ballroom entrance. Not yet. Nathan nodded slowly, but beneath his calm exterior sat growing unease. He couldn't explain it fully. Something about Amelia lately felt emotionally unpredictable. Not dramatic. Worse. Controlled. And controlled pain is often more dangerous than emotional chaos, because it usually means someone has already made peace with painful truths internally. Across town, Amelia sat inside a black car staring quietly out the window while Manhattan lights reflected across the glass. Beside her rested a small silver clutch purse. Inside it, screenshots, printed messages, and enough truth to destroy Nathan's carefully crafted image forever. Her breathing remained calm, but internally, her heart felt shattered beyond repair. Not because of one affair, because of the months of emotional abandonment leading up to it, the loneliness, the confusion, the self-doubt. And tonight, Nathan would finally understand what emotional betrayal truly costs. As the car stopped outside the gala entrance, photographers immediately rushed forward snapping pictures. "Mrs. Carter, over here. You look stunning tonight." Amelia stepped out gracefully wearing a black dress elegant enough to command attention without trying. The cameras captured her calm smile. But none of them could see the truth hidden behind it. Tonight wasn't just another billionaire celebration. Tonight was the beginning of a public collapse years in the making. The ballroom glowed like something pulled from a movie. Crystal chandeliers reflected against polished marble floors, while servers moved elegantly through crowds carrying champagne and expensive wine. Investors laughed loudly near the stage. Reporters whispered about business deals. Executives shook hands beneath golden lighting. Everything looked perfect. Exactly the kind of image Nathan Carter spent years building carefully. And standing near the center of it all was Amelia, composed, elegant, silent. Nathan spotted her from across the room almost immediately. For a moment, he forgot the investors around him, forgot the cameras, forgot the pressure, because Amelia looked breathtaking tonight. But there was something else in her expression too. Distance, not anger, not sadness, something colder. Nathan approached her slowly. "You made it." Amelia turned toward him calmly. "I said I would." Nathan leaned down, slightly kissing her cheek for the cameras automatically. The gesture felt rehearsed. Both of them noticed. Camera flashes exploded around them. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter, over here." Nathan placed a hand lightly against Amelia's back, while posing for photographs. To everyone watching, they still looked like the perfect power couple. Successful, beautiful, untouchable. But Amelia could barely breathe beneath the weight of what she already knew. She glanced across the ballroom, and there stood Vanessa. Elegant navy dress, professional smile, tablet in hand coordinating schedules near the executive tables. For one suspended second, Vanessa's eyes met Amelia's. Something flickered instantly across Vanessa's face. Guilt. Amelia noticed immediately, because guilty people often recognize the moment truth gets too close. Nathan followed Amelia's gaze subtly. His chest tightened. "Vanessa's helping organize the board presentations tonight," he explained quickly. Amelia looked at him carefully. "I didn't ask." Nathan's stomach dropped slightly. Again, that calmness, that emotionally controlled calmness, that increasingly unsettled him. Before he could respond, another investor approached enthusiastically. "Nathan, incredible quarter, my friend." Nathan shifted automatically into professional mode, shaking hands and smiling, while Amelia stood beside him quietly. And as she watched him charm the room effortlessly, something painful became crystal clear. Nathan still knew how to show emotional presence. He simply stopped bringing it home. That realization hurt more than the affair itself. Because emotional neglect becomes harder to excuse once you realize someone is still capable of warmth elsewhere. An hour later, guests settled near the stage for Nathan's keynote speech celebrating Carter Global's expansion success. Nathan stood backstage reviewing notes while Vanessa adjusted the presentation schedule beside him. "You okay?" she asked softly. Nathan exhaled heavily. "Something feels off tonight." Vanessa lowered her eyes briefly. Guilt twisted painfully inside her chest, because deep down, she knew why. Nathan looked toward the ballroom entrance where Amelia sat elegantly near the front tables, speaking politely with board members. "She's been acting strange for days," he admitted quietly. Vanessa's expression tightened. "Nathan." He looked at her. For the first time in months, fear moved visibly behind his confidence. What if I already ruined everything? The question hit Vanessa harder than expected, because suddenly, this no longer felt exciting, or emotionally comforting, or romantic. Now, it simply felt destructive. "You need to tell her the truth," Vanessa whispered. Nathan stared at her. "Tonight?" "Yes." But Nathan immediately looked toward the massive crowd gathering beyond the curtains. Investors, media, executives. Panic flickered across his face. Not because he lacked guilt, because exposure terrified him. And that's the problem. With hidden betrayal, people often avoid honesty not to protect others, but to protect themselves from consequences. Nathan rubbed his forehead. "I can't destroy everything publicly." Vanessa looked away painfully, because, whether he admitted it or not, everything was already breaking. Meanwhile, Amelia sat quietly at her table, while conversations blurred around her. Her fingers rested lightly against the silver clutch purse beside her. Inside sat months of lies. Every message, every confession, every betrayal. She watched Nathan backstage through the soft lighting. Even now, part of her still loved him. That was the cruelest part. People imagine betrayal instantly destroys love. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes love survives painfully beneath heartbreak, confusion, and disappointment. And that makes healing even harder. A woman seated beside Amelia smiled warmly. "You and Nathan always look so strong together." Amelia returned a polite smile. If only she knew. That was the frightening thing about public relationships. People fall in love with appearances. They never see the loneliness hiding privately underneath them. The ballroom lights dimmed slightly. Applause erupted as Nathan walked onto the stage confidently. Tall, controlled, charismatic. Exactly the version of himself the world admired. Nathan smiled toward the audience. Naturally. "Good evening, everyone." More applause. Tonight isn't just about celebrating financial success. It's about loyalty, partnership, and the people who stand beside us while we build something meaningful. Amelia lowered her eyes briefly. The irony almost physically hurt. Nathan continued speaking smoothly, while giant screens behind him displayed company achievements and smiling executive photos. To build something lasting, he said confidently, you need trust. Without trust, success means nothing. Amelia's grip tightened slightly around her purse. Across the ballroom, Vanessa closed her eyes briefly, because suddenly every word Nathan spoke sounded painfully hypocritical. Not intentionally. That somehow made it worse. Nathan genuinely believed himself to be a decent man. But decent people still cause devastating damage when they avoid accountability long enough. Nathan looked toward Amelia while continuing his speech. And I especially want to thank my wife Amelia. The room applauded warmly. Nathan smiled softly toward her. She stood beside me long before success ever arrived. Everything I built started with her believing in me first. Amelia felt tears burn unexpectedly behind her eyes. Because part of that was true. That's what made betrayal emotionally complicated. Nathan wasn't entirely fake. Their love wasn't entirely false. Reality was messier than that. He loved her, and still betrayed her. Both truths existed together painfully. Nathan continued speaking. Strong relationships require honesty, sacrifice, and commitment. Amelia almost laughed softly hearing that, not amusement, heartbreak. Because sometimes, the people preaching loyalty publicly are privately failing it the worst. Nathan finished his speech to thunderous applause. Executives stood clapping. Investors smiled proudly. Cameras flashed endlessly. Nathan stepped away from the podium, relieved the speech was over. Then, Amelia stood up slowly. At first, nobody noticed. She moved gracefully toward the stage, holding her silver clutch calmly at her side. Nathan looked confused, seeing her approach unexpectedly. Amelia reached the stage stairs carefully. The room continued applauding Nathan's speech. Then Amelia reached for the microphone. And suddenly, the applause began fading. Nathan's expression shifted instantly. Amelia, he whispered quietly. She looked at him calmly. Not emotional, not hysterical. That frightened him immediately, because controlled pain is incredibly dangerous. Amelia turned slowly toward the audience. Hundreds of wealthy guests stared back expectantly. The ballroom fell silent. Then Amelia finally spoke. I think it's important, she said softly into the microphone, that everyone here understands something about honesty before tonight continues. The silence inside the ballroom became immediate, heavy, confused. Nathan's heartbeat slammed hard against his chest as he stared at Amelia beside him on stage. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Amelia, he said quietly, forcing a smile for the audience, maybe this isn't the time. Oh, she interrupted softly, still calm. I think it's exactly the time. A nervous ripple moved through the crowd. Executives exchanged glances. Investors shifted uncomfortably. Several reporters instinctively reached for their phones. Nathan stepped closer, lowering his voice. We can talk privately. Amelia finally looked directly at him, and for the first time in years, Nathan saw absolutely no emotional dependence in her eyes anymore. Only pain, only clarity, only the terrifying calmness of someone who had finally stopped protecting another person, at the expense of themselves. No, she whispered. We've been private long enough. Those words sliced through him instantly. Around the ballroom, conversations died completely. Even the servers stopped moving. Amelia faced the audience again. For years, she said softly into the microphone, I believed emotional silence was something marriages eventually survive. Nathan felt panic rising visibly now. Amelia, please. But she continued, I told myself stress explained the distance. I told myself work explained the loneliness. I kept making excuses for a man I loved because I didn't want to believe he had emotionally left our marriage long before he physically betrayed it. Gasps spread quietly through the ballroom. Nathan's face lost color instantly. Across the room, Vanessa stood frozen beside the executive tables, horror slowly spreading across her expression. Amelia opened her silver clutch carefully, then removed several printed screenshots. Nathan's stomach dropped violently. No, 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 no. Strong relationships require honesty, Amelia repeated softly, glancing toward him. That's what you said tonight. The audience remained absolutely silent now. Some people stared directly at Nathan. Others looked away uncomfortably. Amelia lifted one printed message carefully. So let's be honest. Nathan moved closer urgently. Amelia, stop. The desperation in his voice shook slightly, and for the first time all night, people saw fear instead of confidence in Nathan Carter. Amelia looked at him calmly. Why? She asked quietly. Were you honest with me? Nathan opened his mouth. Nothing came out, because standing there beneath bright lights and hundreds of eyes, he suddenly realized he had no defense left. Amelia turned back toward the audience. My husband spent months emotionally investing in another woman while I sat at home wondering why the man I loved slowly stopped seeing me. Several women in the audience lowered their eyes immediately. Because heartbreak recognizes heartbreak. Amelia read directly from the paper in her hand. Talking to you is the only time I feel understood lately. A stunned murmur spread across the ballroom. Nathan closed his eyes briefly. God. Amelia lifted another page. Last night felt dangerous. Then another. I wish things were different. The room became painfully still. Vanessa looked physically sick now. Nathan finally stepped forward more firmly. That's enough. For the first time, emotion cracked visibly through his voice. Not anger. Shame. Amelia looked at him carefully. No, she whispered. Not yet. Tears finally filled her eyes for the first time all evening. But her voice remained steady. That woman trusted you, she said quietly, gesturing toward herself. She defended you. She waited for you. She loved you while slowly disappearing emotionally beside you. Nathan's chest tightened so painfully he could barely breathe, because hearing Amelia describe herself that way forced him to confront something he spent months avoiding. He had watched his wife become emotionally lonely, and still chose emotional escape elsewhere instead of facing the damage honestly. Amelia lowered the papers slowly, and the saddest part, she continued softly. I kept blaming myself for your distance while you were building emotional intimacy with someone else. Several people in the audience visibly wiped tears from their eyes now. Not because of scandal, because her pain sounded real, raw, human. Nathan ran a hand shakily across his face. Amelia. But this time his voice sounded broken. Not controlled, not powerful, just broken. Amelia looked at him for a very long moment, and suddenly the anger inside her weakened beneath grief. Because despite everything, this was still the man she once built dreams with. The man who used to dance with her in tiny kitchens. The man who once promised she'd never feel emotionally alone beside him. That history made the betrayal hurt infinitely worse. Amelia swallowed hard before speaking again. You didn't destroy our marriage in one night, Nathan. Her voice cracked slightly now. You destroyed it slowly, conversation by conversation, silence by silence, lie by lie. Nathan lowered his eyes, because every word was true, and truth feels unbearable when there's finally nowhere left to hide from it. Across the ballroom, cameras recorded everything now. Phones captured every expression, every silence. Every moment, Nathan Carter's perfect public image collapsed in real time. Vanessa finally stepped backward quietly through the crowd, not because she didn't care, because shame overwhelmed her completely. For months she convinced herself this emotional connection existed because Nathan was unhappy. Now she was being forced to confront another reality. Another woman had been emotionally breaking while she became the person Nathan escaped toward. And no matter how emotionally lonely Nathan felt, that damage was real. Nathan finally spoke again, softly. I never wanted to hurt you. Amelia gave a painful smile through tears. But you did. Simple sentence. Devastating truth. Because intent does not erase emotional destruction. Nathan stepped closer again, lowering his voice desperately. We can fix this. Amelia stared at him in disbelief. And suddenly, she understood something heartbreaking. Nathan still didn't fully grasp how deeply the betrayal reached. Because this was never only about sex, or messages, or Vanessa. It was about abandonment. Months of emotional abandonment. Amelia slowly handed the microphone back toward the stunned event coordinator nearby. Then she looked at Nathan one final time beneath the chandeliers and flashing cameras. I spent years protecting your image, she whispered softly. Tonight, I finally protected myself instead. The sentence shattered whatever composure Nathan still had left, because, deep down, he knew she was right. Amelia turned and walked off the stage calmly, while the ballroom remained frozen in absolute silence. No applause, no movement, no music. Only the sound of Nathan Carter standing alone beneath bright lights, as the consequences of his choices finally reached him publicly. And for the first time in years, success, money, power, and influence could not save him from the truth. By morning, the entire country knew. News outlets replayed the gala footage endlessly. Billionaire CEO publicly exposed by wife during executive gala. Power couple scandal shocks Manhattan. Amelia Carter praised online for emotional speech. Social media exploded with opinions. Some people defended Amelia passionately. Others mocked Nathan relentlessly. Clips of the confrontation spread across every platform within hours. But behind the headlines and viral reactions, 3 people sat separately confronting the emotional destruction left behind. Nathan remained inside his office overlooking Manhattan long after sunrise. He hadn't slept. His tie still hung loose around his neck. His speech papers remained scattered across the desk, untouched. The silence inside the office felt suffocating. For years, Nathan built his life around control. Controlled image, controlled emotions, controlled success. Now, everything felt exposed. And the worst part? The public humiliation wasn't even what hurt most. It was finally seeing Amelia's pain clearly. Really clearly. Not the polite sadness he ignored for months. The deep, emotional loneliness hiding underneath it. Nathan replayed her words endlessly in his head. You destroyed it slowly. God, she was right. The affair hadn't started physically. It started emotionally long before that. One vulnerable conversation, then another, while Amelia sat at home, emotionally starving beside him. Nathan covered his face with both hands slowly. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to fully feel the weight of what he had done. Not justify it, not explain it, not minimize it. Just feel it, honestly. And honesty can become unbearable once denial finally collapses. His phone buzzed repeatedly across the desk. Board members, investors, PR teams, media requests. Nathan ignored every call. Because none of those things mattered compared to the reality waiting beneath all of it. He had broken the woman who loved him most. Miles away, Amelia sat inside a quiet hotel suite downtown, staring blankly at the city through enormous windows. Sophia sat nearby, scrolling through headlines angrily. These people are insane, Sophia muttered. Look at this comment section. Amelia barely listened. Emotionally, she felt exhausted beyond tears now. Not triumphant, not satisfied, just empty. Sophia lowered the phone carefully. You okay? Amelia gave a faint, humorless laugh. I honestly don't know. That was the strange thing about revenge fantasies. People imagine exposure automatically creates relief, but heartbreak rarely disappears simply because truth becomes public. If anything, the emotional reality often feels heavier afterward. Amelia walked slowly toward the window. Last night, I thought exposing him would make me feel stronger. And? Amelia looked down toward the streets far below. I just feel sad. Sophia softened instantly. Because you still love him. Amelia closed her eyes briefly. That was the painful truth nobody online understood. Nathan wasn't some stranger. He was her best friend once. Her safe place once. Her future once. Love doesn't vanish instantly because betrayal arrives. Sometimes, heartbreak exists precisely because love still remains underneath it. Meanwhile, across the city, Vanessa sat alone inside her apartment, watching coverage of the gala replay again on television. Each replay made her stomach twist harder. Amelia's voice echoed painfully through the apartment. I kept blaming myself for your distance, while you were building emotional intimacy with someone else. Vanessa muted the television abruptly. Guilt settled heavily inside her chest now. Because hearing Amelia publicly describe that loneliness shattered the emotional fantasy Vanessa quietly built around the relationship. Nathan wasn't emotionally trapped inside some loveless marriage. A real woman had been suffering quietly while Vanessa became part of the emotional escape. And no matter how emotionally connected Nathan felt to her, that truth changed everything. Her phone buzzed suddenly. Nathan. Vanessa stared at the screen for several seconds before answering quietly. Hello? Nathan sounded exhausted. We need to talk. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly. There's nothing left to say. Vanessa. No, she interrupted softly. Amelia was right. Nathan froze. Pain moved sharply through him hearing that. Vanessa's voice cracked slightly. She was sitting at home blaming herself while we kept crossing emotional lines anyway. Nathan lowered his eyes, because hearing the situation spoken plainly removed every comforting excuse he once hid behind. Vanessa continued quietly. I kept telling myself you were lonely, that your marriage was already broken emotionally. Nathan rubbed his forehead slowly. It was broken. Yes, Vanessa whispered painfully. But you were still married. Silence filled the call. Heavy, unavoidable. Then Vanessa spoke again softly. You need to stop running from emotional responsibility, Nathan. The words hit brutally hard because deep down, he knew emotional avoidance caused almost everything. Instead of honest conversations with Amelia, he escaped. Instead of confronting loneliness, he escaped. Instead of fixing emotional distance, he escaped emotionally into someone else. And now, everything lay in ruins around him. Nathan finally whispered, I don't know how to fix this. Vanessa looked away toward her apartment window. You probably can't fix all of it. The honesty hurt, because some damage changes relationships permanently. Later that evening, Nathan finally returned to the mansion. The house felt colder than ever before. No music, no warmth, no Amelia, only silence. He walked slowly through the massive living room, noticing details he ignored for months. Her architecture sketches neatly stacked near the couch, her coffee mug beside unfinished designs, a blanket folded carefully where she used to sit, waiting for him at night. Evidence of emotional presence he stopped appreciating while it still surrounded him daily. Nathan sat heavily on the couch, staring at the empty room, and suddenly memories attacked him painfully. Amelia asleep against his shoulder during road trips. Amelia crying tears of happiness on their wedding day. Amelia laughing while paint covered both of them during their first apartment renovation. He loved her. That realization made everything worse. Because people imagine betrayal only happens when love disappears. Sometimes betrayal happens because emotionally immature people seek comfort instead of confronting problems honestly. And the consequences destroy everyone involved. Nathan's chest tightened painfully. For months he kept focusing on how overwhelmed and emotionally exhausted he felt. He never stopped long enough to fully see Amelia's emotional exhaustion too. That realization broke something inside him. Upstairs inside their bedroom, Nathan opened Amelia's closet slowly. Several things were missing. Not everything. Just enough to make reality feel final. He sat on the edge of the bed staring at the empty spaces quietly. And for the first time, Nathan genuinely understood what it felt like to be emotionally abandoned. Not because Amelia stopped loving him, because his choices finally pushed her beyond what love alone could carry anymore. 3 days passed before Nathan and Amelia saw each other again. 3 long days filled with headlines, silence, and emotional exhaustion. Nathan spent most of that time ignoring public damage control meetings while sitting alone inside his office, replaying years of mistakes in his mind. Meanwhile, Amelia stayed at the hotel, quietly avoiding interviews and social media completely. She didn't want attention. She wanted peace. But peace felt impossible when heartbreak still lived inside her chest. On the 4th evening, Nathan finally texted her, "Can we talk?" Honestly this time. Amelia stared at the message for a long moment. Part of her wanted to ignore him completely. Another part, the part still emotionally tied to years of history and love, needed closure, not reconciliation, truth. Finally she replied, "One conversation." Nathan answered immediately, "Thank you." An hour later, Amelia entered the private rooftop restaurant Nathan reserved, overlooking the city skyline. The setting would have once felt romantic. Tonight, it only felt heavy. Nathan stood as soon as he saw her approaching. For a moment, neither spoke. They simply looked at each other quietly. And both noticed the same thing instantly. They looked emotionally exhausted. Nathan seemed thinner somehow, less polished, less invincible. Amelia looked calmer, but heartbreak still shadowed her eyes deeply. "You came," Nathan said softly. "You asked." He pulled out her chair automatically. Old habits, old love, old familiarity. The painful part about broken relationships is that affection often still exists inside ordinary gestures. Amelia sat slowly, while Nathan remained standing awkwardly for a second before taking his own seat. Silence settled between them immediately. Not angry silence, grieving silence. Nathan finally spoke first. "I'm sorry." Amelia lowered her eyes briefly. The words hurt more than she expected. Because months ago, she desperately wanted to hear them. Now they arrived after the damage already shattered everything. Nathan swallowed hard. No excuses, no blaming work, no blaming stress. He looked directly at her. "I hurt you." Amelia stared at the table quietly. "Yes," she whispered. Nathan's chest tightened hearing the pain in her voice again. For months, he avoided fully seeing it. Now, he couldn't escape it anymore. "I kept telling myself the affair happened because things between us were already broken emotionally," he admitted softly. "But that's not the truth." Amelia looked up carefully. Nathan forced himself to continue honestly. "The truth is, instead of fixing what was broken between us, I escaped from it." Tears burned unexpectedly behind Amelia's eyes. Because finally, he was speaking with emotional honesty instead of avoidance. Nathan rubbed his hands together shakily. "I was lonely, overwhelmed, emotionally exhausted." He paused painfully. "But so were you." Amelia's breathing trembled slightly hearing that acknowledgement. For so long, she felt invisible inside her pain. Nathan lowered his eyes, and instead of turning toward my wife, his voice cracked quietly. I turned somewhere easier. The honesty shattered something inside Amelia emotionally. Not because it excused anything, because it was true. Vanessa became emotional relief, while Amelia became emotional responsibility. And that realization hurt deeper than the physical betrayal itself. Amelia finally spoke softly. "You made me feel replaceable." Nathan closed his eyes briefly. "God, no," he whispered immediately. "Never replaceable." But that's exactly how it felt. Nathan looked at her helplessly. "Amelia, for months I blamed myself," she continued quietly. "I thought maybe I wasn't supportive enough, attractive enough, interesting enough." Nathan's face tightened painfully. "No, but while I was emotionally starving beside you," tears finally slipped down her cheeks. "Now, you were giving another woman the parts of you I kept begging for." Nathan looked completely shattered hearing that, because deep down, he knew she was right. The emotional intimacy hurt worse, because it revealed intentional emotional investment elsewhere. Nathan leaned forward slowly. I hated who I became. Amelia laughed softly through tears. You should. The words weren't cruel, just honest. And honesty sounds harsher after months of lies. Nathan nodded, slowly accepting it. You're right. Silence followed again. The city lights glittered quietly around them, while distant traffic hummed below. Finally, Amelia wiped her tears gently. You know what the worst part was? Nathan looked at her carefully. You stopped seeing me emotionally before I even knew another woman existed. Nathan lowered his eyes immediately, because that sentence exposed the real wound beneath everything. Emotional abandonment. The affair simply confirmed it physically. Nathan spoke quietly after a long pause. I think somewhere along the way, I stopped knowing how to be emotionally vulnerable without feeling weak. Amelia frowned slightly. What does that mean? Nathan struggled explaining himself. When things became difficult between us, I felt like every conversation reminded me I was failing you. He swallowed hard, and instead of staying emotionally present through that discomfort, I avoided it. Amelia stared at him silently. Nathan continued softly. Work felt easier. Vanessa felt easier. Everything felt easier than confronting the possibility that I was becoming a terrible husband. The brutal honesty stunned her, not because it erased the betrayal, because for the first time in years, Nathan wasn't hiding behind emotional walls anymore. Amelia looked down thoughtfully. You know what's sad? Nathan waited quietly. I would have fought for us if you just talked to me honestly before all this happened. Those words nearly broke him completely, because he knew it was true. Amelia had spent months trying to reconnect while he emotionally withdrew deeper into avoidance. Nathan covered his mouth, briefly overcome with guilt. I loved you through all of it, Amelia whispered, even when you were disappearing emotionally right in front of me. Nathan's eyes filled instantly. That love made the betrayal feel even uglier now, because Amelia wasn't cruel, wasn't cold, wasn't impossible to love. She was lonely, and he abandoned her emotionally anyway. Nathan finally asked the question haunting him for days. Do you hate me? Amelia looked at him for a long moment, then softly, no. That somehow hurt worse, because hatred would have been simpler. Instead, there was grief, disappointment, love mixed painfully with betrayal. Amelia exhaled shakily. I think I just don't recognize us anymore. Nathan looked around the rooftop quietly. Neither did he. The successful billionaire image, the admired marriage, the carefully controlled life, none of it mattered now. Because beneath all the appearances sat two emotionally wounded people who stopped communicating honestly long before the affair ever began. Nathan finally whispered, I'll spend the rest of my life regretting hurting you. Amelia's eyes burned again, and deep down, for the first time since the gala, she believed him. 2 months later, autumn settled gently across New York. The city looked different beneath golden leaves and colder skies. And somehow, so did Amelia. She stood inside the renovated Brooklyn Community Center reviewing final architectural details while workers moved through the building around her. Natural sunlight poured through the wide glass panels she designed carefully to make the space feel warm instead of institutional. Children from the neighborhood would eventually study there. Families would gather there. People would feel emotionally safe there. That mattered to her. For the first time in years, Amelia felt connected to something that belonged entirely to her again. Not Nathan's company. Not their public image. Her. You really transformed this place, one contractor said admiringly. Amelia smiled softly. So did the team. But internally the compliment warmed her deeply. Because healing sometimes begins through rediscovering personal identity after emotional dependence breaks apart. Her phone buzzed gently inside her coat pocket. Nathan. Amelia stared at the screen for a moment before answering. Hello? Nathan's voice sounded quieter lately. Less polished. More human. I hope I'm not interrupting. You're not. A brief silence passed. How's the project? Amelia glanced around the building. Almost finished. I saw the article this morning. That surprised her. What article? The one calling you one of the most promising redevelopment architects in Brooklyn. Amelia blinked softly. You read that? I read everything about you now. The honesty carried no manipulation, only regret. Amelia walked slowly toward the large windows overlooking the street. How are you? She asked quietly. Nathan exhaled softly on the other end. Learning uncomfortable things about myself. Therapy had changed his voice lately. Not dramatically, but enough for Amelia to notice. Less defensive. Less emotionally hidden. Nathan continued quietly. My therapist says emotional avoidance usually starts long before adulthood. Amelia listened silently. Nathan gave a humorless laugh. Apparently I spent my whole life believing vulnerability makes people weak. Amelia leaned lightly against the window frame. And now? Now I think emotional avoidance destroys more relationships than vulnerability ever could. The truth of that settled heavily between them. because silence had damaged them long before the affair did. Nathan spoke again carefully. I never really understood how lonely you were. Amelia closed her eyes briefly. You never asked. I know. And this time, he didn't defend himself afterward. That mattered more than she expected. Growth often reveals itself through accountability without excuses. Meanwhile, across the city, Nathan sat inside his therapist's office, overlooking Central Park. Dr. Reynolds closed her notebook thoughtfully. You look calmer today. Nathan leaned back slowly. I talked to Amelia, and she sounds stronger. Dr. Reynolds nodded gently. How does that make you feel? Nathan thought carefully before answering. Proud. He paused, and ashamed. Why ashamed? Because she spent years losing herself while supporting my life, and I barely noticed. The therapist remained quiet, allowing him space to continue. Nathan rubbed his hands together slowly. I think I loved being needed, emotionally, more than I realized. Dr. Reynolds tilted her head slightly. What do you mean? Nathan stared toward the windows. When Amelia stopped emotionally centering her life around me after the affair. He swallowed hard. I panicked. The realization embarrassed him. But therapy had forced Nathan into painful honesty lately. Dr. Reynolds spoke carefully. Sometimes people confuse being loved with being emotionally depended on. Nathan lowered his eyes. God, that was true. For years, Amelia's emotional loyalty became something he unconsciously expected instead of appreciated, and once she emotionally detached, he realized how much emotional security she quietly gave him all along. Nathan sighed heavily. I spent so much time thinking about my own pressure and loneliness that I ignored hers completely. Dr. Reynolds nodded. Emotional immaturity often looks like self-focused survival. The sentence hit painfully hard, because survival had become Nathan's excuse for everything. Work pressure, emotional withdrawal, avoidance, the affair. But surviving emotionally at someone else's expense eventually becomes selfishness. Later that evening, Amelia met Sophia for dinner, inside a small Italian restaurant downtown. You look lighter, Sophia observed immediately. Amelia smiled faintly. I feel lighter. Not healed completely, but clearer. Sophia sipped her wine thoughtfully. And Nathan? Amelia looked down briefly. He's trying. That doesn't mean you owe him forgiveness. I know. And she truly did know that now. That was part of her growth too. Before the betrayal, Amelia often confused love with emotional self-sacrifice. Now she understood something important. Loving someone should never require abandoning yourself completely. Sophia leaned forward slightly. Do you still love him? The question lingered quietly. Amelia answered honestly. Yes. Sophia nodded slowly. But? Amelia stared toward the restaurant windows thoughtfully. I don't know if love is enough anymore. That was the heartbreaking truth. Many relationships eventually face. Love matters deeply, but without communication, emotional presence, honesty, and accountability, love alone struggles to survive long-term damage. Across town, Nathan returned alone to the mansion after therapy. The house still felt too large, too quiet. But lately he forced himself to sit inside that silence instead of escaping from it. No late-night office distractions, no emotional avoidance, no Vanessa. Vanessa had resigned from Carter Global weeks earlier. Their final conversation remained painfully brief. We were emotionally unhealthy for each other, she admitted quietly. Nathan agreed. Not because their connection was fake, because it grew from emotional avoidance instead of emotional honesty, and relationships built inside emotional escape usually collapse under reality. Eventually, Nathan walked slowly through the living room, noticing Amelia's absence everywhere now. The architecture sketches were gone. The blanket near the couch was gone. Her presence no longer filled the house quietly. And for the first time in his life, Nathan understood the difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness wasn't simply being physically alone. It was realizing too late how deeply you failed someone emotionally while they were still beside you. His phone buzzed suddenly. A news alert. Community redevelopment project, led by architect Amelia Carter, receives city recognition. Nathan stared at the article photo quietly. Amelia stood smiling naturally beside the renovated building. Not billionaire wife smiling. Not public event smiling. Real smiling. And despite the guilt crushing inside him, Nathan smiled softly too. Because, deep down, he genuinely wanted her happiness now, even if he was no longer part of it. Winter arrived quietly over the next several weeks. Snow covered Manhattan rooftops, while Christmas lights glowed across crowded streets. And for the first time in years, Nathan and Amelia were learning how to speak to each other honestly without pretending everything was fine. Not every conversation was emotional. Not every meeting ended peacefully. Some days were awkward, some painful, some exhausting. But at least, the silence was gone. That mattered. One snowy evening, Amelia arrived at the mansion to collect several remaining boxes from the upstairs closet. Nathan opened the door almost immediately. For a brief second, they simply stood there quietly, familiar, changed, careful with each other now. "You can come in," Nathan said softly. Amelia stepped inside, slowly removing her gloves. The house still carried traces of old memories everywhere. Holiday decorations Nathan usually ignored until Amelia arranged them, the piano they bought during their second anniversary, the framed photographs neither had removed yet. Love leaves emotional fingerprints behind long after relationships fracture. Nathan noticed her looking around. "I didn't change much." Amelia gave a faint smile. "I noticed." They moved upstairs together quietly. No tension tonight, no pretending either. Just two emotionally tired people carrying years of shared history between them. Inside the bedroom, Amelia began organizing boxes calmly, while Nathan lingered near the doorway awkwardly. Finally he spoke. "I read your latest design proposal." Amelia glanced up, slightly surprised. "You understood it?" Nathan smiled faintly. "No, but I understood how passionate you sounded talking about it in the interview." That softened something inside her, unexpectedly. Because Nathan used to listen to her dreams that way once. Really listen. Amelia taped another box slowly. "Therapy helping?" Nathan exhaled quietly, painfully. She almost laughed softly. "That bad?" "It turns out, emotional avoidance ruins a lot more than marriages." Amelia paused briefly. Nathan stepped further into the room. "I spent years thinking providing financially meant I was fulfilling my responsibilities emotionally too." Amelia looked down thoughtfully. "A lot of people think that." "I know." Nathan rubbed his hands together slowly. "But emotional absence damages relationships just as much as financial neglect." The honesty in his voice felt real now, not performative, not defensive, real, and that made everything sadder somehow. Because growth arrived only after destruction forced it. Nathan looked around the room quietly. "You know what my therapist asked me last week?" "What?" she asked, when I stopped being emotionally curious about my wife. Amelia froze slightly, because that sentence reached directly into the heart of what broke them. Emotional curiosity, the willingness to keep learning each other instead of assuming love can survive on autopilot forever. Nathan continued softly, "And honestly, I don't know when it happened." Amelia sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "I think life became about surviving responsibilities instead of nurturing connection." Nathan nodded immediately. Yes, no argument, no ego, just agreement. Because now both of them finally saw the relationship clearly, not as villain versus victim, but as two people who slowly stopped communicating honestly, while emotional distance quietly expanded between them. The affair was still Nathan's responsibility, completely, but the emotional loneliness inside the marriage existed long before Vanessa appeared. Amelia looked down at her hands. "I stopped talking honestly too." Nathan frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I kept saying, 'I'm okay,' when I wasn't." She swallowed softly. "I kept protecting peace instead of protecting myself emotionally." Nathan stared at her quietly. Because she was right too. Silence damaged both of them. Amelia continued carefully. "I think I became so focused on supporting your world that I slowly abandoned my own." Nathan's chest tightened painfully again. "And I let you." The simple honesty of that sentence filled the room heavily. Snow drifted quietly beyond the bedroom windows, while neither spoke for a moment. Finally, Nathan sat carefully in the chair across from her. "You know something strange?" Amelia looked up. "I thought success would make me feel secure." "And?" Nathan gave a sad smile. "It just gave me more places to hide emotionally." That honesty nearly broke her heart, because underneath all the power and confidence, Nathan had spent years emotionally terrified of failure, terrified of vulnerability, terrified of disappointing people, terrified of not being enough. And instead of confronting those fears honestly, he escaped into work, control, and eventually another emotional connection. Amelia leaned back slowly against the bedframe. "For a long time, I thought your cheating meant I wasn't enough." Nathan immediately shook his head. "No, but now." She looked toward the snowy windows thoughtfully. "I think it had more to do with emotional weakness than lack of love." Nathan lowered his eyes instantly, because that was exactly the truth. The affair wasn't proof Amelia lacked value. It was proof Nathan lacked emotional maturity at the time. And understanding that distinction mattered deeply for healing. Nathan finally looked at her again. "I'm sorry it took losing you for me to understand all this." Amelia's eyes burned softly. "You haven't completely lost me." The words stunned him, not because they promised reconciliation, because they carried openness, possibility, humanity. Nathan swallowed hard. "You really think there's still anything left between us after all this?" Amelia thought carefully before answering. "Yes." Nathan's breath caught slightly, but then she continued softly. "But it can't be the old version." And deep down, they both knew she was right. The old relationship was gone. Too much truth had surfaced. Too much pain had happened. Too much emotional damage existed now. If anything survived between them moving forward, it would have to be rebuilt honestly from the ground up. No pretending, no emotional avoidance, no silent resentment. Nathan looked at her carefully. "What are you afraid of now?" Amelia answered without hesitation. "Losing myself again." The honesty of that nearly shattered him emotionally, because finally, he understood the full cost of what happened. Amelia hadn't only lost trust in him, she lost pieces of herself, trying to survive the emotional loneliness inside their marriage. Nathan nodded slowly. "You'll never have to disappear emotionally for me again." Amelia searched his face quietly, and for the first time in a very long time, she believed he truly understood what that meant. Outside, snow continued falling softly over the city while two people who once nearly destroyed each other with silence finally sat together, speaking honestly at last. Not perfectly, not magically healed, but honest. And sometimes, honesty is where healing finally begins. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Love Stories by Mr. Johnson, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me honestly in the comments, do you believe a relationship can truly recover after betrayal? Or do some mistakes permanently change the way two people love each other? Because sometimes love survives the pain, but only when both people are finally willing to stop hiding behind silence and start choosing honesty instead.